recording, and then I'm going to make Tali our host. There we go. Okay. So welcome everyone. We're so excited that we get about 45 minutes or so of our beloved Tali time with TJVillage. This is very exciting. I'm going to, hopefully you all had a chance to look at her fun pictures that we shared on our flyer and that she shared on Facebook the last couple days, but I'm going to briefly read her bio and then turn the Zoom over to her. So Tali is an Israeli-born, Los Angeles-based pianist, music educator, and vocal coach. She has collaborated with a wide array of musicians, including Placido Domingo and Stephen Schwartz, performing in major music venues such as Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center. Tali currently serves as chair of the collaborative piano program at CSUN and teaches Jewish music at Hebrew Union College and my alma mater, the Academy for Jewish Religion, California. She has been at Temple Judea since 1999 and is eternally grateful to have found her spiritual and musical home. Tali received both Master and Doctor of Musical Arts degrees on full scholarship from the Thornton School of Music at USC, majoring in keyboard and collaborative arts. And I'm just going to add personally that I cannot wait till we can make music together again, live in person. And so welcome everyone, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Tali. Thank you for being with us.
I like your wishful thinking that I'm only going to talk for 45 minutes, but that's okay. Hopefully, I'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully, we'll have also time for any questions or comments. First of all, thank you, Rabbi Cantor Bloom, for asking me to be here. I always feel at home at Temple Judea, and some of you people I've known for a really long time. So it just makes me so happy to hang out with you guys and see you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to play for you and talk a little bit about my musical background. Let me share my screen. Okay, 1 second. All right, here we go. So Lily read my bio, and I came to Judea in between UCLA and USC when I was just embarking on my musical career, and I've been very blessed to have this career. But today I actually want to take a look back at my musical roots and where it all began, and because I really owe all of this to one very special lady, and I will talk about her quite a lot today. So some of you know I grew up in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and then people always ask me, but how come you don't have an accent? Well, it's because when I was 3 years old, my father did his postdoc in Caltech here in Pasadena, and we moved here for 2 years, and then he worked for 1 year in Virginia for NASA. So we were in Virginia, and then we went back to Israel when I was in first grade, and that's where I finished high school and eventually came here as a young adult. But my musical journey begins, of all places, in Virginia, and that is where I found the earliest photos. That's me, and I remember that keyboard. I was purchased this keyboard, I think at Kmart or something like that, Sears maybe. And I remember the little buttons, I remember everything, and my mother had piano lessons growing up, and she thought she would teach me some of the basics. So we got the step-by-step books and the Thompson. Any one of you have ever studied rudimentary piano might remember those red books. And this was the beginning when in Virginia in the 80s, obviously. We came back to Israel afterwards, and my mother signed me up for lessons at the Israeli Conservatory in Tel Aviv. These are beautiful photos I found online, but this is not where I went. This is brand new construction from past few years. When I went there, I only found one picture. It looked like that. There were 2 buildings like that. And I remember, the smell of those trees, the growth. We would spend all that time outside and sitting on those benches. And she called the conservatory and she spoke to the lady who was the pedagogical director of the conservatory, who was also one of the piano teachers. And my mother said, she sounded really nice. She said, "Hey, can Tali study with you?" And she said, "No, no, I have a wait list, but don't worry, I'll find her a good teacher." And that pedagogical director slash piano teacher was a woman named Malka Mevorach. This is a picture of her from when she was younger. She was a very successful pianist. She lived for a while in the United States, had Carnegie Hall recitals, and was very successful. Eventually moved back to Israel with her husband and studied in the conservatory, worked at the conservatory. I think if everyone can. It sounds like someone's unmuted. Is that right? Okay. Okay. So this is Malta.
Yeah, Larry, can you please just everyone try to stay muted? We would really appreciate it. But Larry Weintraub, if you can mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. That said, if you have a question, don't hesitate. I'm from Israel. We're totally fine with interjections, right? Okay, so this is Malka Bevorach, and she said to my mother on the phone, "No, I'm full. I don't have any room. Wait list, blah blah blah. But I'll hear her, and I'll know which teacher to give her to." And as the story goes, she heard me and she said, "Okay, that one's mine." And I was hers from first grade through 12th grade and beyond. Even when I came to the United States, words can't encapsulate what she meant, not only to me but to all of her other students. And we really do have this very special connection. Like, we all feel like a little bit like brothers and sisters in a way. And she was just such an incredible person. She was funny. She had like spunk, but very, very warm. She loved all of her students. She always taught gently. It was never with anger or with threatening. It was always by inspiration. And there was no magic, right? It was just week after week, twice a week for an hour. Oh, this finger and not that finger, and this less and this more. And just the minuscule little things of the music, and gave me word by, as if teaching a language, word by word, syllable by syllable. She was just an incredible lady. And so when I was preparing for today, I thought, how nice would it be to sort of, as a tribute to her, look at some of the pieces that she taught me and why those were so foundational, and why she chose them to teach. So for the program today, I don't know if I'll get through all of these pieces, but this is the plan. I'm going to start with Bach, a couple of pieces by Bach, a couple of examples from Joseph Haydn, Chopin, Debussy, Bartok, and finally Israeli composer Yechezkel Brown. So I'm going to start with a prelude in A minor by Johann Sebastian Bach. So I remember complaining to Malka, we always had to play Bach. There was like never a question. You always had to be working on something by Bach. And I said to her once, I really do not enjoy performing Bach because there's no pedal and it's dry. And like if you make one mistake, the whole thing falls apart and I really don't like it. And she said to me, yeah, I know, but one day you won't be able to live without him, I tell you. And she was right, dang it. So he's a Baroque composer, lived first half of the 18th century. People love to mention that he had 20 kids. It's true, he had 20 kids. Unfortunately, only 6 of them survived through to adulthood, which always makes me think like, wow, that home was life and death every day. Someone was pregnant and someone was struggling. And but more than just the fact that he had 20 kids, unusual for the time, he was a family man. He cared about the education, not only of his boys, of his girls as well, and his wives. He had 2 wives. One died and he married again. And so we have books, for example, his notebook for Anna Magdalena Bach, who at the time had time to practice piano if you have 20 children, right? But he would write pieces for his wife to study on the keyboard. So very dedicated family man, which is unusual for the time. Very, very religious, extremely Christian, loved writing in triple meter because of the number 3 and the Christian symbolism. Extremely religious, never traveled outside of Germany, didn't speak any other language, which is unusual for Europeans at the time. So sort of close-minded, right? And after he passed away, for the most part, he was forgotten. His pieces were used as exercises for composers, but nobody performed his music. Most people didn't know who he was. Until 100 years later, Felix Mendelssohn, who was familiar with some of his work, said, I'm going to travel back to his church. I'm going to see if there's any music up there in the attic. And guess what? He unearthed the St. Matthew's Passion, the B minor Mass, the big pieces, all of the cantatas. Thanks to Mendelssohn, 100 years later, we have this music. And it was performed for the first time since Bach was alive 100 years later. So today we say Bach, but at the time it wasn't as straightforward. Okay, so first piece I'm going to play, Prelude in A minor. And I chose this one because I remember Malka saying to me, my teacher, that there was a time in her life where she had to play this every morning before she started her day. And let's hear. Lest you think that all of Bach's music is as cerebral, I don't know if you could hear, but it's so chromatic, right? It's got twists and turns and twists and turns and twists and turns. He has other pieces too, and the second example is much more lyrical. He could also truly write for the voice and the voice in the piano. And this second example is a lyrical example. So why is Bach considered such a genius? I recently saw a joke online that said, Mozart died, he went up to heaven, and God said, hey, Mozart, I want you to be the conductor of my celestial orchestra. And Mozart says, wow, that's a great honor, God, but what about Bach? And God says, I am Bach. Right? So that's like a musician's joke. But why? Why is Bach considered like so foundational? And it's because this thing called counterpoint. I'm not going to put a whole music theory lecture on you, don't worry. But basically, if I had in one word or two words to describe what is counterpoint, it's a weaving technique of themes. And they're woven in a certain way that makes a really, really robust texture. So instead of a 3-minute song, you can build an hour-and-a-half symphony on this texture. And it's basically, you have one theme, and then it appears in another voice. And then there's an answer. So in its simplest form, it's like a round. It's like an echo. But in the more complex forms, there are changes, and it changes the harmony, and it kind of makes the music go in a certain way. And you're going to hear a lot of that in this particular prelude. One thing to keep in mind about Bach is obviously the piano was not invented in Bach's time. He had a little harpsichord or clavichord, one of those earlier keyboard instruments, but he also wrote for the organ. And it's really fun to see some of the piano pieces. If you look at the piece I'm about to play for you, look, it has these really long sustained notes over 2 bars at a time, right? Everywhere, like it's constant sustained notes. And it's likely that he wrote this with the organ in mind. The organ sustains its notes. A piano, I hit the note and it decays. It gets less loud, right? Organ sustains. So it's likely that this piece was written for organ. Okay, let's take a listen. So, thank you. So different style completely. Let me just take a second. Rabbi Cantor Bloom, everybody, the sound is okay? Everything technical? Okay. Because when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see anything, chat, nothing. So just want to make sure I'm not talking.
Sounds great. I feel bad that you can't hear us applauding, but I am.
That's okay. All right, great. Let me get back here. Okay. Okay. moving on. This is Joseph Haydn. This was my piano teacher's favorite composer, which is quite a strange statement to make because he's a contemporary of Mozart and Beethoven, and it's like either you love Mozart or you like Beethoven, but who loves Haydn? But she loved Haydn. Well, let's talk about him for a second. Those are his years. He's a prime example of all composers at the time were sponsored by somebody, right? There was no such thing as like a freelance composer. They were sponsored by aristocracy or the church. So like Bach worked for the church. He worked for the Prince of the Esterhazy estate. This is what that place looks like today. Not bad, huh? And he spent his whole life there writing, we're going to have an important dinner on Thursday. Can you write a couple of trios because somebody there plays, I don't know, violin? Like, depending on sort of who was there and who the boss was at any given time, Haydn would write and he wrote so many symphonies. He wrote over 100 symphonies, and all sort of this very frilly, elegance. That was key for Haydn. He was admired by Mozart. So there would be no Mozart without Haydn. I think that's why Malka appreciated him so much. He was a true craftsman when it came to musical structure. You know how like some people can maybe create like special effects on their computer, but like, yeah, can you pick up a pencil and paper and just draw something really well? And that's what Haydn can do. So nobody cares about the pencil and paper when you can see the big flashy stuff on screen. But my teacher appreciated this guy's craftsmanship. And yes, humor and elegance, those are two words that can really encapsulate most of his music. There are all these stories. Some of his symphonies had got these nicknames based on why they were written. So for example, he was getting kind of sick and tired of people falling asleep in the middle of his symphonies because, all these aristocrats would eat, and then they have to listen to a symphony and they were kind of nod off. So he wrote the Surprise Symphony where for 15 minutes you barely hear the orchestra. It's slow, it's quiet, it's this theme. And it goes on and on with variations forever. I mean, anybody would fall asleep. And then he gives them like the loudest chord here, right here. And it comes like in the middle of nowhere, and he did it to like wake everybody up, right? So there's the Surprise Symphony, there's the Farewell Symphony where the musicians were arguing over getting raises and they wouldn't give them raises. So he did a symphony where one by one every musician abandons his instrument and walks off the stage. Anyhow, so he had a lot of humor in his music. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One is sort of a fast, sonata allegro. I'll play a part of the sonata in D major, and then a more lyrical part from a different sonata in E flat major. now from a different sonata, a slightly more lyrical movement. Always very elegant cadences. Always very. You can just you can hear the dance. Always the dance in Haydn. Check. Okay, good. All right, moving on. Let's do some Chopin. Okay, this was not Malka's favorite at all. This was my favorite growing up. Everyone wants to play Chopin, right? Just so pretty. This is an actual photograph of Frédéric Chopin. He's a Polish composer who lived in Paris, had a short life, unfortunately. Was very sickly for most of his life. This is an actual photograph of him, first half of the 19th century. He was influenced by a style called bel canto. So while he's part of the Romantic movement in art and music, but there was a very specific style in opera at the time called bel canto. Bel canto means beautiful singing. Seems obvious. What do you mean? Opera is always beautiful singing. Why do you need to call it bel canto? Well, up until that point, opera, it's there. You have the singers, you have the chorus, you have the dancers, you have the orchestra. It's very, very, very complex. And then, beginning of the 19th century, a group of Italian composers said, no, 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 you're missing the point about opera. Nobody cares about anything except the voice. So they simplified everything else. The orchestra is like one giant guitar. 60 people play this for 2.5 hours. And then the melody, of course, is heavenly, right? Let's look at a couple of examples, or even just one example of what I mean by bel canto style. Okay, so oops. So the voice has all the embellishments. The voice has all the beauty, and the orchestra is meant to be. No, no, stop. Wait. The orchestra. No. The orchestra is meant to be. One second. I need to plug my computer. Meant to be invisible, right? Just there for support, but it's really all about the voice and the beautiful melody. And that is the style that Chopin was so inspired by. So, but how do you do that on a piano? Didn't I just say that when you hit a note on the piano, it decays? How do you sing on a piano? What do you do? Well, this is where some changes in the physicality of the instrument were in his favor. The pedal was developed. With the pedal, things can kind of vibrate a little longer. And what he did was he would come up with, these like many notes at once, and the pedal sort of contains it all, and it's its own sort of style of singing on the piano. But the bel canto style is really what he was imitating. I wrote Rise of the Middle Class. That's also relevant to Chopin because people, there was suddenly a middle class. People suddenly had a little bit of money and they had a little bit of time and they could buy a piano, and it wasn't all aristocracy like in Haydn's time. People wanted little pieces. They wanted little waltzes and mazurkas and nocturnes and, stuff that they could just kind of read on the piano after dinner, right? And dance together. So we start seeing all these miniature forms of music pop up by composers of the Romantic movement. So let me play for you. Um, his Nocturne in C sharp minor. It's one of his most famous pieces. And pay attention to how he uses the melody in the right hand and how it is so much more important than anything, any rhythm or harmony or anything else anywhere else in the piano. that pretty? It's so pretty. Chopin is just so sentimental. And I think that's why Malka didn't, she didn't like that he got so many points for just being pretty. It's like saying, oh, I want to marry someone because she's very beautiful. Yeah, how about like smart, funny, so anything, just that's it. So I think she resented that people are like drawn to Chopin just because of the beauty. She's like, well, Haydn has structure, Haydn is intelligent music. Okay. Next person, next example I'm going to present is Robert Schumann, contemporary of Chopin, although different style. Many people know he had his wife Clara Schumann, right? So they had this crazy romance. He was actually her childhood piano teacher, and when she was old enough, they had to sue her father to get married, but they did. And anyhow, so there have been like movies made on their partnership. This is a drawing of both of them, and there's actually a photograph of Clara for later on in life. She outlived Robert by quite a bit. Robert, unfortunately, was mentally ill. Today, people say he was bipolar or manic depressive. I don't know exactly, obviously, but he tried committing suicide several times. He ended up, unfortunately, wasting away in an asylum at age 46. Extremely, extremely tragic. Makes you wish he lived in a different century. Scenes from childhood. This is a small album of little pieces that he wrote that are just that, scenes from childhood, and they're each titled. There's Träumerei, which is what I will play for you, which is dreaming or daydreaming. There are other ones as well. Instead of me playing, by the way, my copy of this, I also had to go through all my sheet music and find my Malka sheet music. My copy of this was from Malka, and she wrote to Tali, greetings for your 10th birthday. Which in and of itself is a little scene from childhood, right? It's like she knew it. Okay, so instead of me playing, I actually want to play for you Vladimir Horowitz, one of the greatest pianists ever. He left Russia at a young age and he lived in the United States and sort of didn't go back for many, many years. And finally, in 1986, he went back to Moscow and gave the first recital in a long time, and that was a very, very big deal. And as one of his encores, he played Träumerei, which is dreaming from scenes of childhood. It's about 2 or 3 minutes long. And what I love is that in this YouTube clip, they kind of scan the audience a little bit. You have children, you have grown-ups, and everyone is just somewhere in their own mind, right? It does something different to each person. At some point, there's a person sitting back with his eyes closed, and you can see a tear. You can see like a stream of tears down his face. It's just so touching. So I thought, why don't we listen to this beautiful clip? Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, it's just magical. Thank you, Horowitz. Okay. No, wait. Okay, where are we? Let's see. It is 4:45. Okay, a couple more. Um, let's talk about Debussy for a second. Okay, and some of you, I presented at length about Claire de Lune last year for one of the Temple events, I think the Pillars Dinner. Um, I'm just going to talk about Debussy for a second. This is Debussy, French composer, turn of the 20th century, mainly. Impressionist style. So we all know this is the Wikipedia impressionism definition. Art movement characterized by relatively small, thin, visible brush strokes, open composition, emphasis on accurate depiction of light and its changing qualities, the passage of time, ordinary subject matter, inclusion of movement is a crucial element. So all this is very true for the music as well. These are examples of impressionist paintings, right? So in the music, it has a feeling where many times it's barless, even though it is written with bars because we need to be able to count. You don't hear it when you're listening to it. You can't tell. It's just this texture, right? And it's a little. There's something ineffable about it. And transparent touch. For example, the piece I'm about to play for you, Claire de Lune, is in D flat major, which has it's basically all black keys. All right. And the black keys on the piano, first of all, they're very thin. You can't use your whole finger on them. You have to use the tip of your finger, and you can't really plant your arms on them because then you'll hit the white notes. So you're kind of playing like this. You're kind of very, very light with the tip of the finger and not a lot of arm weight, like Brahms, you can really dig into the piano. Here, he forces you just even by choice of key to be above the keyboard and keep it very, very light. Claire de Lune, it's a famous poem by Paul Verlaine. This is the French and the English translation, set by many, many composers. The poem itself for voice and piano, including Debussy, who said it a couple of times. And then he set this version, which is piano only. And, you can kind of imagine certain motifs corresponding to certain motifs in the poem. The poem, obviously, it's sort of there's some symbolism in there, right? I don't think the fountain sobbing with ecstasy and the marble statues, I don't really think that's what he's talking about. As one of my USC mentors would say, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, ask someone who's giggling. So a lot of sensual symbolism in this poem. And it's just a love. It's not even about the moon, really, right? At some point, the moon makes an appearance here, but it's really a one paragraph love poem. So let's listen to Claire de Lune. Claire de Lune. Thank you. Do I have time for one more? One more. Okay? Okay, great. So here we go. I'm going to skip Bartok. Don't worry, you're not missing anything, believe me. I included it because Malka loved Bartok, but it's fine. Yechezkel Brown. This is an Israeli classical composer, died in recent years. And Malka, Israel is a small country, right? So she knew all these Israeli classical composers very well. I'm going to play for you one movement from his famous sonata in D. I'm going to play the middle movement, but I had played the entire sonata when I was at USC. I had to do a solo piano recital as one of my doctoral recitals, and I chose to do this piece, and I wrote program notes for it. So I'm going to read for you what I wrote at the time. Throughout my 12 years attending the conservatory in Tel Aviv, there was nothing I hated more than the annual obligation of playing a classical piece by an Israeli composer. The music sounded all the same to me. It was not atonal, but it was not exactly beautiful to my ears either. It sounded dry, excessively technical, developed through a series of pointless patterns. But it was not foreign. This music was yellow and dry like the sands of Tel Aviv and the stones of Jerusalem. It was relentless, busy, and always blurred the lines between classical and pop. It combined elements of traditional music, traditional Jewish cantorial music, with Middle Eastern rhythms and the sounds of train, tractors, and other features of the new country and its image of the Jewish worker developing the land. It was a sound I had gladly avoided until that once a year dreaded jury in which I would be forced to cram a movement just to pass the compulsory requirement. Tonight's piece, Yechezkel Brown's Sonata in D, is a classic example of this first-generation Israeli classical music. In 2006, after the passing of my Israeli piano teacher, Malka Mevorach, I flew for a 3-day turnaround to Israel in order to participate in a concert in her memory. After the performance and before I left the building, Malka's daughter, Orna, ushered me into her studio. Before you go back to Los Angeles, take anything you want. The room was stacked with scores, a musician's dream. I thought to myself, don't just take stuff you can get off the internet. Look for something that is hers. This is your only chance. I opened a cabinet and instinctively pulled out an Israeli music file. Malka loved Israeli music and had personally known many of the leading Israeli composers since her career, both as a pianist and a teacher, was almost as old as Israel itself. I sifted through the stacks until I found a familiar manuscript, Sonata by Yechezkel Brown. It bore a dedication I had recognized, to M.M. in friendship. This was a sonata he had dedicated to Malka in 1957, and over the years had become a staple in pianistic repertoire. I asked Orna if I could have it. She thought for a second, and then she said, "Well, it's you, Tali, I'll always know where it is." And with a gesture so generous it could only have been related to Malka herself, she let me keep the manuscript, a small piece of Israeli music history, and a cherished family possession. Today, I perform this sonata thinking of my teacher who guided me for over 20 years. Ironically, the sound I had avoided as a child now accompanies me as an adult. It is the sight and sound of my country. It is the voice of my teacher. And it is what I yearn to hear more than anything else. And that is still true today. So let me play for you movement number 2. Thank you, everyone, so much for having me here and for listening. Thank you.
Applause,
Anybody?
applause. Thank you, Tali. I see people applauding, and it was such a joy to scroll through, see people smiling and tears, and I mean that's what music does to us. So
True.
will you if we have a few minutes, will you take, a question or two, or
Absolutely.
so you can unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment, something for Tali. We'll take a couple minutes to do that. So feel free to unmute yourself. But let me just thank you. First of all, this was a really a special hour. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So anyone can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Oh, Tali, just bravo, bravo, bravo.
Thank you
Such
so
a tremendous joy to listen to you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marge.
It was wonderful to have you embellish the composers' lives so that we could understand better what the music was standing for. I really appreciated that. This was a beautiful time for me. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Good. I'm glad.
Um,
I find that, I'm one of those crazy people who shows up to concerts and early so I can read the program notes because then I know what to listen for, you know? Yeah, I hear you.
beautiful.
Everything you do is inspiring. I mean, I've loved you since the day you got there.
Tali is known in the city as the leading Jewish music director for Los Angeles, and then some. So we're very fortunate to have her.
Yeah. Yes.
It's so nice to, I mean, I'll speak for everybody and say that we love hearing you on Shabbat, and, the Jewish music side, maybe as a second part, to this series of Tali time, but it was so nice to hear, the music that influenced you, that maybe didn't have Jewish roots, but that is a part of you.
Yes.
Influenced you.
And someone once asked me, what is your favorite of everything you do? Because I do many, different things, right? Of everything you do, what's your favorite thing? What's your favorite job, right? And I swear I'm not saying this because I'm talking to you. I said it at the time and I say it today. My favorite work, my favorite sort of time to play, favorite thing I do is in my profession is Friday nights at Temple Judea, not on Zoom, in the sanctuary. That it's become, I've been doing it for over 20 years, and it's become this constant that I say to myself, no matter what happens next week, right? No matter what I'm faced with, I come here and it's this piano, not, the one in the sanctuary. I think it was a donation by Al Rosenblum, if I'm not mistaken, many years ago. That particular piano with the musicians who play with us and with Allison and Yona, and it's just, and all of you, and it's making that music is the most meaningful thing that I do, truly. And it's what also feeds me. So, yeah.
Tali,
It feeds us.
Tali, I've always had a curiosity about your skills at accompaniment, and I know you teach that at CSUN.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's possible, given the complexity of that subject, if you're able to give the unmusical members of our
Sure. So it's definitely it's an expansion for someone to go from solo piano to accompanying, and some people have more of a sense to it. But honestly, in general, anyone who has a instinct for piano already has some, and I'll tell you why. Every other instrument sings one note at a time, with the exception of harp and guitar, but they're sort of on the side, right? I'm talking about classical instruments. They do one note at a time, so they only deal with the melody, and concepts of harmony or counterpoint. Remember that weaving thing I was talking about with Bach? Anything that has to do with more than one line is not something they do on a regular basis. Someone who gravitates towards the piano, where we do play many notes at the same time, and we can do counterpoint, and we can do harmony just with ourselves, already has an ear for multiplicity in music. Already has an ear for more than one thing. So then you take that and you expand it and you say, okay, now Another line is going to be done by someone outside of you, right? But you learn it the same way that you learn any piano music. Does that make sense? So it's new and different, but it's also, pianists are already, someone who gravitates toward the piano already has a little bit of a proclivity, is that the word, for collaboration. And then of course, yes, I mean, when I teach my students, the first thing we do is I tell them, you're so used to singing with your right hand and your melody is always in your right hand, but guess what? Someone else has got it now and they're your right hand. So your right hand is less important, and now like the balance shifts in between the hands. There are many technical ways in which this manifests, right? So learning to listen for the breath if it's a singer or a woodwind player, looking at bow direction if you're playing with a instrumentalist, because that it changes the color, and also when they change the bow, it's a different phrasing, right? You're no longer just phrasing for yourself. You kind of have to do it with someone else, and based on somebody else's shaping and phrasing, and then just the whole coordination between two people, which in any context is, sometimes it's more successful. So dealing with that and really being an effective communicator about music. But I feel like collaborative piano, it's similar to conducting, and where music lifts off the page, and you're really able to communicate about it, not related just to your instrument and the physicality of the instrument. Does that answer a little bit of your question?
Well, yeah, it just makes me want to know more.
Well, maybe another time I can talk about that.
I can't wait for the next presentation. And I can't wait for for us to be back in the temple.
Yes.
Yes.
So enjoyable, Tali. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for giving us some live music that is so missed. So, thank you from all of us, from TJVillage and from our souls and our hearts. It was really, really beautiful.
Thank you for brightening the day.
Thank you, everyone.
And it's a perfect way to bring in the joyous holiday of Purim that we have this evening. And so I wanted to remind everyone about our spiel this evening at 7:00. And then I also wanted to just tell everyone to stay tuned for TJVillage, the mature adult community of Temple Judea's programming for next month in March. I wanted to mention one in particular, which is actually a month from today, because our presenter is here with us, hopefully still. Roger Dolan, Beverly's son, and his partner Emily on March 25th are going to be giving us a taste of another kind of art presentation. They are both muralists. And so Roger and Emily are going to be presenting to us on community-based art, murals, and the power of collaboration, talking about collaboration. So again, that's March 25th. It's a Thursday at 4 p.m. But hopefully you all received brochures in the mail. You'll hear from me. The calendar on the website has all of our events. But again, before I let everyone go, I just wanted to thank Tali. Thank you so much for filling our hearts and our souls with music. And I guess stay tuned for part 2, because everybody wants it. So
I want more.
So we'll talk. But thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good to see you.
Good to see everyone.
Fabulous.
Stay healthy out there. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.